Serve my husband, or get out of my house right now. Those words from my own daughter Lydia cut through the quiet afternoon like a cold knife. Brent, my son-in-law, lounged in the leather armchair, the last gift my wife, Ruth, left before she passed feet on the table, beer can swinging in his hand, not even looking at me. "Make it the expensive beer, old man," he said, half smirk, half sneer. I looked around the house. I had paid off the place once, full of family laughter, and all I could smell was the chill of betrayal. I didn't argue. I didn't cry. I simply set the grocery bag down, the nylon handle biting into my wrist, and walked slowly to my room. Ruth's old suitcase still sat on the shelf, the suitcase from our happy days. I took it down, opened it, and smiled. They think I'm leaving as the loser. They don't know the real game is only beginning. If you're still here, I'd love to know where you're watching from. Every comment helps this story reach more hearts, and if it moved you, give it a like so others can find it too. My name is Samuel Whitaker, 68, widower, a financial specialist for 30 years, before I retired in Riverton, Montana. I have one daughter, Lydia, and I once believed she was the greatest pride of my life. After Ruth died of cancer, Lydia was the only reason I kept going. I never imagined that the same daughter, the one who held my hand at her mother's funeral and said, "I'll take care of you, Dad," would be the one to drive me out of the very house whose mortgage I paid down to the last dollar. I used to think love meant giving. So for years, I gave everything. I paid $70,000 for the private college Lydia wanted, even though I knew a state school would have been fine. I added $22,000 for the lavish wedding Brent and his family couldn't afford. Then when they wanted their first house, I pulled $95,000 from my retirement to cover the down payment. I told myself that was love. I never thought it would turn me into a dependent in my own daughter's eyes. Every month, I still paid $1,150 for the mortgage, $320 for utilities, $450 for groceries, and to make things easy for them, I added both of their cars to my own insurance policy. Every bill came in my name, and I never asked for a cent back. I believed helping your kids was a parent's duty. I just didn't expect that one day they'd think this house was theirs and I was merely a guest. That Saturday afternoon, when I carried in the groceries, eggs, milk, bread, the Corona Brent likes he was still there, eyes glued to the basketball game on TV. "Grab me a beer," he said without turning his head. I spoke gently. "Brent, I just got home. Let me put these away first." He tossed back. "You're already standing, don't be lazy." The expensive kind, not that cheap stuff you drink. The cold from the milk seemed to travel into my bones. Lydia came out of the kitchen with a dish towel in her hand. "What's going on?" Brent pointed at me, voice flat. "Your dad's making a fuss because I asked him for a beer." I looked at my daughter, waiting for a word in my defense. Lydia only sighed and said softly, "Dad, don't make it a big deal. It's just a beer." "Sweetheart," I said quietly, "this is my house." Brent laughed, flicking the empty can into the trash. "Our house, old man. Money's no big deal." "You're old, stop clinging." Lydia looked at me with eyes so cold I felt like a stranger. Then she said the words I'll never forget. "Serve my husband, or get out of the house right now." The room went dead silent. I could hear the wall clock ticking and my heart pounding like a hammer against my ribs. Ruth used to say, "Kindness is strength, but if you use it the wrong way, it turns into chains." I understood that line in that exact moment. I didn't answer. I walked slowly to the bedroom and took down the old fabric suitcase, the one Ruth used on our honeymoon to Yellowstone. I opened the closet, took 3 changes of clothes, wool socks, my blood pressure meds, Ruth's photo, and my financial notebook where I track every expense, transfer, and all the payments I've covered for Lydia and Brent these past 5 years. As I pulled the zipper, Lydia froze in the doorway. "Dad, what are you doing?" "I'm doing what you told me," I said without looking up. Leaving the house. Brent tried to sound calm, but his voice shook. You won't dare. I stood up straight and looked at him, not with anger, but with the clarity of a man who once taught him how to read a loan agreement he couldn't understand. You have no idea what I dare, Brent. I carried the suitcase to the door. The air smelled of beer and leftover food. Lydia reached out. Dad, wait. I stopped, turned my back, and said slowly, From now on, everyone pays for their own choices. Then I left. I didn't look back. My old Buick fired up with a familiar rumble. I drove slowly down the side street, lined with maples turning deep red. At the corner, I saw the sign for Pioneer Lodge, the small motel where I once stayed when Ruth was in the hospital. I knew few people passed through there, and no one asked personal questions. When I opened the door, the small room smelled of old soap and warm yellow light. A single bed, a small table, a window looking out toward distant mountains. I set the suitcase down, sat on the edge of the bed, and looked at my calloused hands trembling slightly. 50 years of work, saving every dollar, and here I was, driven out of the very home I built by my own daughter. But I didn't feel bitter. I felt clarity, clearer than ever. I took a small voice recorder from the suitcase, Ruth's birthday gift to me back when I was still working. I plugged it in and checked it. Every word from earlier was captured. Serve my husband, or get out of the house. I turned the volume down, listened, and smiled. I put pen to a blank page and wrote the first line, Battle map starting today. I opened my laptop. The pale blue glow lit my face. I logged into the bank, savings, retirement, insurance, automatic transfers. The money flows appeared as clear as a report. I knew exactly what I was going to do. No more automatic payments going to 145 Cedar Drive. No one else riding on my auto insurance. No more authorized card in Lydia's name. That night, I looked out the window. Streetlights rippled across the far lake. I heard Ruth's voice in the wind. Kindness doesn't mean letting people walk all over you. I nodded. That's right. Tomorrow, I would shut down every leak and let the truth find them on its own. I wanted them to learn what it means to live on their own money. I set the suitcase by the window, closed the laptop, and told myself, they think I've given up. In fact, I'm just starting over with my self-respect intact. Sunday morning, I woke earlier than usual. The dim light of dawn slipped through, the thin curtain, washing the wall in a soft orange. A truck rumbled past outside, and it reminded me of Ruth. She used to wake at the same time, brew coffee, and turn on the news. I sat up, made a pot of strong black coffee, and inhaled. No waffle smell, no voices, but my mind felt unusually light. Maybe freedom doesn't arrive with cheering. Maybe it comes from cold clicks of the mouse. I sat at the laptop and opened my first Mountain Bank account. The system was familiar. I'd used it for 25 years as an advisor. The numbers appeared. Automatic payments, due dates, bills, every line steady, precise, and all of it for them, not me. Watching the monthly deductions felt like watching my blood drawn a drop at a time. I called the hotline. A young woman's voice came on, friendly and distant at the same time. Good morning, First Mountain Bank. How can I help you today? I need to cancel the automatic mortgage payment for 145 Cedar Drive, I said clearly. The account ends in 4917. She paused, probably checking. Mr. Whitaker, this has been active for 5 years. Are you sure you want to stop it? I'm sure, I said slowly. Very sure. Would you like to leave a reason on the account? I looked out the window. The recipient is no longer eligible for assistance. Keys clicked. Then she said, It's canceled. You'll receive written confirmation within 3 business days. I thanked her and wrote the confirmation code in my small notebook. Everything neatly logged like I've done all my life. This time not for work, but as proof of my own clarity. I moved to the auto insurance. 2 cars on the screen. Brent's 2019 Silverado and Lydia's Honda Accord. both on my policy. Total monthly premium, $279.63. I smiled. Not a big number, but a quiet shackle nobody noticed tightening. I called my agent, a middle-aged man named Gary with a low, familiar voice. "Gary, it's Sam Whitaker. I want both cars removed from my policy effective today." "Both?" he asked, a bit surprised. "The Silverado still lists your home address." "I know," I said. "I don't live there anymore." He paused, then said softly, "Got it. I'll update it now. Effective today." "Thanks, Gary. Please send the confirmation to my backup email." "You got it. I'll do it today." I hung up and added a line in my notebook. Auto insurance canceled. 8:27 a.m. Each number, each small step felt like removing another link from an invisible chain. Next, I opened another banking tab: credit cards. 3 accounts showed: Visa, MasterCard, and a Best Buy store card. Under my name, a small line read, "Authorized user, Lydia Whitaker." I remembered the familiar text. "Dad, I just swiped a little. I'll pay it back tomorrow." Tomorrow never came. I called Visa. "Remove the authorized user, Lydia Whitaker, from my account." "Yes, Mr. Sam. We can do that right away. Please note, the current balance remains your responsibility." "I know," I said. "I'm not running from the past. I'm ending the present." I said the same to the other 2 cards. Each time I heard "completed," I felt lighter, like finally getting a full breath after someone's had a hand on your chest for years. I paused, poured more coffee. The smell filled the small room, mixing with the morning light at the window. I opened the suitcase drawer and took out Ruth's photo. She was smiling in it, eyes crinkled at the corners. "You were right, Ruth," I murmured. "When you stop giving unconditionally, people show their true face." Then I opened life insurance. At the top of the beneficiaries list, Lydia Whitaker, set more than a decade ago. I remembered why. Ruth wanted a safety net in case life turns. Now I understood: to protect someone, sometimes you have to cut off the pipeline that feeds dependency. I clicked Change Beneficiary and entered the Peters, Montana Veterans Support Fund, the charity I donate to every year. Ruth supported it too, her brother served. If anyone deserves that $120,000, it's those who truly sacrificed. I printed the temporary form, signed it, took photos, and sent them to my attorney, Ellen Davis, who handled my will. I texted briefly, "Ellen, please update this clause." "Effective immediately." She replied minutes later, "Understood, Sam. The right call." I stopped the recurring emergency transfer Lydia and Brent always texted about. The screen showed, monthly emergency transfer $600, recipient, Lydia Whitaker. I remembered all the texts. "Dad, the car broke." "Dad, something happened at the house." "Dad, my card's locked." Different excuses, same habit, asking without shame. I hit cancel. The prompt popped up, "Are you sure you want to cancel this recurring transfer?" I stared at it for a moment, then pressed yes. A small ping sounded, but inside, it felt like a freedom song. I opened my notebook and wrote each line: mortgage auto payment, canceled. Vehicle insurance, removed. Credit cards, user, deleted. Life insurance beneficiary, changed. Emergency transfer, stopped. Next to each, I carefully noted the time, transaction code, and a check mark. That discipline ran deep from my years as head of credit. I used to tell my staff, every transaction needs a stamped trail. Memory is not as reliable as writing. Now, I wasn't proving it to a client. I was proving it to myself that I'm lucid, steady, and know exactly what I'm doing. Done. I switched to property records. I opened the folder. Property title 145 Cedar Drive. The paperwork was intact. Owner Samuel Whitaker. No co-owner, no second lien. I scanned every line like an investigator. Brent and Lydia had no legal claim. They were simply guests. I snapped the key pages, saved them as a PDF, and sent them to my backup. Email the account I created after Ruth passed, with a password only I know. If anything ever happens, this is my life's black box. I remembered my old real estate attorney, Richard Callahan, who closed that purchase. I dialed, a little hesitant after so long. His voice was the same, steady and warm. "Sam, long time. You still at Cedar Drive?" "I've moved out," I said slowly. "I need to ask about evicting occupants at will. The two staying in my house are no longer invited." He was quiet for a moment, then asked, "You have full ownership docs?" "I have everything. I also have the recorded ultimatum." "Then you're fine. Montana requires a 30-day notice. I can prep the forms this week." "Good. Email them to me. I want to do this by the book." "You've always been careful, Sam," Richard said with a small laugh. "And this time, I think you're doing the right thing." I hung up and sat still for a while, not to rest, to listen to silence. For the first time in years, my phone wasn't ringing. No "money please" texts, no "Dad, it's urgent," just the steady ceiling fan and the wind outside the window. I looked at the list of canceled transactions, the screen's glow reflecting off Ruth's photo beside it. Her face was as gentle as ever, and I could almost hear her whisper in my head, "You finally learned how to love yourself, Sam." I smiled, closed the laptop, and poured the last of the coffee. Outside, daylight had fully arrived. A few birds crossed the window frame, small but clear, like a sign of a beginning. My phone lay still on the table. No messages, no calls. They didn't know what was coming, and maybe that silence was the sweetest sound I'd ever heard. By Friday, exactly 1 week after the morning I cut off every payment, my old phone wouldn't stop vibrating. When the screen lit up the 10th time, I just looked at it without answering. I knew it was Lydia, the familiar tone of someone afraid, and not yet understanding what was happening. By afternoon, the missed calls list stretched to 22. Each one had a different tone, curious, polite, then panicked and angry. The first was Monday morning. "Dad, I think the bank messed up. The mortgage payment was rejected." I called them. They said it's strange, like the transfer account isn't active anymore. Her voice was still calm then, almost sure this was a technical glitch. I smiled, listening to the auto-saved voicemail. I pictured her sitting on the sofa I bought, frowning at her phone, believing in a few minutes Dad would fix everything. But that new world had changed. I wasn't the guy who fixes everything anymore. 2 days later, her voice was different, hoarse and rushed. "Dad, the bank says if we don't pay by Friday, they'll send a past due notice." "Dad, I don't know what to do. Brent said to call you." I listened through and deleted it. No reply. I noted it in my notebook titled Timeline, my writing. Neat and steady. Wednesday, 9:42 a.m. Lydia, worried but not angry. Reason, mortgage past due. An hour later, the phone rang again, not Lydia this time. "Brent, what did you do, huh? The auto insurance expired. I got pulled aside at work today. The manager asked what's going on. I got embarrassed. You hear me? Call me back now. I'm not kidding." "I'm not kidding," sounded like a child stomping his foot. I stopped the message midway. No anger, no pity, just a hollow tiredness. In the small room at Pioneer Lodge, I sat by the window and listened to the wind scrape the tin roof. The sky darkened, and I realized this silence was the balance I'd been missing for years. By Thursday, the messages changed shape. "Dad, I'm sorry for what I said, but the payment's about to be late. I'm freaking out. Brent doesn't know what to do." "Dad, why would you do this to me? I'm your daughter. You always said family is everything. All you have to do is call the bank." "One call, Dad." I listened to all of it. Every message mixed apology, blame, and manipulation, like she never learned where love ends and enabling begins. I poured myself a black coffee, opened the notebook, and logged the times, the tones, the excuses. Maybe the professional instinct was still there. The man who once managed financial risk was now managing emotional risk. I needed a record so that when I got soft later, I'd remember. Blind kindness already cost me dearly. By Friday afternoon, there was a knock. 3 raps firm, not polite. I peeked through the curtain, Lydia and Brent. Both looked worn and tired. I cracked the door, just enough to see their faces. "Dad," Lydia said, eyes red. "We need to talk." "I think we're done talking," I said evenly. "Dad, I know I was wrong, but it can't end like this. That house is ours." I smiled, light but firm. "Wrong, Lydia. It's my house. I only let you two stay there." Brent stepped forward, beer breath, sharp. "Stay there? You kidding? I paid to fix the plumbing. I cut the lawn every week. I've lived there 3 years. It's my house." I looked him in the eye. "Cutting grass doesn't make you an owner, Brent, and fixing a pipe isn't rent." His jaw clenched, face flushing red. "Old man, you think you can." I raised my hand, calmly cutting him off. "If you raise your voice again, I'll call the police. I have lawful occupancy." "You don't." He stopped, his eyes flickering between anger and confusion. Lydia tugged his sleeve and lowered her voice. "Enough, Brent." Then to me, "Dad, I'm sorry. I just want you to come home." "I used to want that too," I said slowly. "Not anymore. I stayed there too long and lost myself." I didn't wait for their answer. I closed the door and slid the bolt. Their footsteps echoed down the hall for a moment, then faded. If you were standing at the Pioneer Lodge door that night, face to face with Brent and Lydia, what would you say? Just one sentence. Short but strong enough to reset the boundary. Write it in the comments. Your words might be the nudge someone needs to know when it's time to close their own door. I stood still with my back against the door. My heart pounded not from fear, but from release. For years I'd let others decide my feelings. Now, with one bolt of a lock, I took that right back. I walked to the table and made more coffee. Steam rose, the bitter smell filling the room. I set the cup down and listened to the wind whistling through the pines. Inside, the weight eased. I opened the timeline notebook and wrote a new line. Friday, 5:38 p.m. Lydia and Brent showed up, stayed calm, didn't let them in. Confirmed. I control the story. I sat in the chair by the window. The weather was turning. The first raindrops tapped the tin roof. Far off, headlights smeared across the main road. Life outside kept moving, and I was only just learning to live for myself again. I wondered what Lydia was thinking. Maybe she was confused, unable to grasp how the gentle father had become cold. But I knew this wasn't coldness. It was waking up. Some lessons only silence can teach. That night, I didn't turn on the TV or read the paper. I just listened to the rain and let my mind drift with every tap on the roof. When the clock struck 10 p.m., I turned out the light and got into bed. I picked up the voice recorder, the quiet witness of these days, and set it by my pillow. I played a snippet, hearing Lydia's first line again, "Serve my husband or get out of the house." I didn't feel angry anymore, just quiet. A quiet with weight to it, like stones finally sliding off my shoulders. I wrote a few final lines before lights out. Saturday, go to the bank to review account history for any irregular activity. Don't let emotions lead. Stick to the plan. I set the pen down and looked out the window. Against the dark sky, raindrops caught the streetlight and glittered like falling stars. I closed my eyes, letting my heartbeat sink with the rain. After years of broken sleep, that night I slept deeply. No dreams, no struggle. Just an old man lying still in a small room, feeling that every storm had begun and this time he would be the one steering the boat through it. Saturday morning, I left Pioneer Lodge while mist was still veiling the lake. The sky was a soft gray, and tiny droplets clung to the car hood like little beads of glass. I drove straight to Riverside Diner, the small place on the old road into downtown Riverton. It used to be where my wife, Ruth, and I ate breakfast every weekend. The coffee there isn't special, but the air makes you feel like you still belong somewhere. I hadn't been sitting long when a rough baritone spoke behind me. "Sam Whitaker, I thought you'd fallen off the map." I turned. Alvin Porter, my old colleague at First Mountain Bank, still holding his coffee, wearing a tired but friendly deppery smile. 10 years working together, I knew Alvin was the kind of man honest to a fault, which is why I knew he wouldn't show up without a reason. "I need to see you," I said, "because it's about my son-in-law, Brent Klein." Alvin raised an eyebrow. I figured. When I saw that name on a file, I had a hunch. "What's going on?" I invited him to sit, waited for the server to top off our coffee, then lowered my voice. 3 months ago, did Brent touch any second mortgage paperwork at the bank? I need the truth." Alvin sighed, a flicker of reluctance in his eyes, then opened his leather case and pulled out a thin packet. "Brent Klein applied for a $50,000 junior mortgage on the house at 145 Cedar Drive, which, if I'm not mistaken, is titled to you." I froze. My heart skipped a beat. He listed himself as the owner? Right. In the file, he declared the entire asset was an intra-family transfer, with a very convincing forged and signature. He even brought a doctored copy of the deed. I gripped my cup. The heat bit into my fingertips, but I didn't let go. Alvin went on, "We ran a title search. The record is clear. Sole owner is you. No transfer, no co-owner. The bank rejected the file immediately and flagged it as fraud risk. I personally signed that report." I was quiet. Each of Alvin's words was a small knife, cutting away whatever was left of my trust. I told myself Brent was just hot-headed, clumsy, disrespectful, not a con. But now every coat of false polish had peeled off. Alvin lowered his voice further. "Between us, Sam, I'm hearing from a few folks inside the system that Brent owes gambling debts at Silver Ridge Casino. Somewhere around $18,000 to $20,000, depending on who you ask." I looked out the window where light rain freckles dotted the street. "So those nights," he said, "he was working extra. Those days," he said, "he was seeing clients." They were casino runs, I said slowly. "Do you still have copies of that file, Alvin?" "Yes. The bank keeps a hard copy in storage, but I can print you a certified duplicate. We can't officially hand it to a third party, but between old friends, I think you should have it." I nodded. "Thank you. I may need it." A moment later, Alvin returned with a thick envelope stamped, "Internal copy, for review only." He looked at me, eyes heavy. "Sam, be careful. A guy like Brent, when cornered, stops knowing right from wrong. You pulled funds, cut payments, he'll see that as an attack, not justice." I smiled, light but cold. "Justice doesn't need him to understand it, Alvin. The law just needs to." I left the diner with the envelope resting in my briefcase, heavy as a stone on my chest. I stopped by the post office, made copies of everything, then sent a set to my backup email, the account I keep for evidence. Banking habits taught me things only truly exist when they have duplicates and timestamps. That afternoon, I returned to my room, opened the laptop, and created a new folder, Brent Klein, Evidence. Each image file got saved carefully: the loan application copy, the rejection memo, the title, search header, dates, and handler names. I labeled each item: Alvin Porter, fraud confirmation; filing date, March 12; reason for denial, forged signature and ownership. Reading those lines, I felt no satisfaction, only a thick quiet, the kind that comes when you know the trust you protected has died for good. By Monday, I called the Riverton County Courthouse. A middle-aged clerk answered, clear and professional. I'd like to ask about evicting occupants at will in a private residence with no lease. Are you the owner? Yes. In that case, you need to file an eviction notice with a 30-day notice period. After it expires, if they don't vacate, you can request assistance from the sheriff's office. Papers must be served in person or posted prominently at the address. I wrote everything down: her name, the time, the relevant sections. When I hung up, I was as clear as when I balance a ledger. That afternoon, I drove to McIntyre Law, the attorney who helped on my purchase. He greeted me with a firm handshake. Sam, been a while. Is this one serious? Just time to clean my own house, I said. I laid out the situation. McIntyre listened without interrupting, nodding along. Finally, he said, "You've followed procedure. I'll draft the eviction notice, citing the verbal term respect and contribution to household costs, and emphasize those two breached basic obligations. When you file, attach utility statements, mortgage and insurance payments, and cost records. The court won't take long." I signed the packet, the fountain pen heavy in my hand. When the ink dried, it felt like a chapter in my life had clicked shut. McIntyre printed 3 sets, one for court, one for the shelf. Sheriff, one for me. At the top, in bold black, notice of termination of occupancy, breach of respect and contribution terms. Leaving the office, the wind had picked up. I held the documents tight to my chest and stepped down the stairs. The smell of damp wood, paper, and rain mixed together, rich and familiar, like the scent of work back when I handled risky loans at the bank. But this time, I wasn't protecting a bank. I was protecting myself. I went home, scanned every page, and filed everything under legal docs. Each record got a date, time, and witness. I added a line to my journal. Monday, 4:15 p.m. Eviction notice finalized. 30-day clock starts. Prepare detailed exhibits, statements, bills, receipts. Time to let the law speak for me. I set the pen down, leaned back, and looked out the window. Riverton's sky was a burning red, sunlight flashing across the lake. I took the last sip of coffee and listened to traffic fade. A strange calm crept in, not victory, but the certainty of a man who chose the right road. I used to fear silence. Now I knew. In silence, justice begins to speak. Tuesday morning, I reached the Riverton County Courthouse earlier than my appointment. The place carried that familiar smell of paper, ink, and human worry, a scent I breathed for over 3 decades in finance. I pulled a number, waited, and when my name lit up, I stepped to window 4. The clerk's silver hair, glasses on a chain, skimmed my file and said crisply, "Mr. Whitaker, your papers are in order. I'll stamp and forward them to the county sheriff for service." The stamp hit the page with a dry thud, but to me it sounded like a verdict. From today, the law officially stands with me. I left the counter holding a notice marked "Effective immediately." I stared at that round seal for a long moment, then tucked it carefully into my file. After years of being dismissed, I finally had something none of them could deny: legal recognition that I am the owner and they are occupants in breach. On my way out, I stopped at the sheriff's office to meet the referral. Lieutenant Nora Kemp, the civil investigator overseeing higher-risk matters. Nora was in her 40s, tall and lean, with sharp gray eyes behind thin glasses. She shook my hand with measured strength, professional, not cold. "The court sent your file," Nora said, opening the packet. "I see notes about financial fraud and safety concerns. Can you clarify?" I told her everything from the forged $50,000 mortgage attempt to Brent's gambling debts at Silver Ridge Casino and the threats and minor scuffle at Pioneer Lodge last week. I handed over bank documents, Alvin Porter's memo, and the hallway video the hotel manager, Mr. Matthews, had promised to provide. Nora listened without interrupting, tapping a few notes. When I finished, she spoke plainly, voice steady. "You're doing exactly the right thing, Mr. Whitaker. Based on your account and the documents, Brent Klein shows escalating civil intrusion and likely intent for financial fraud." I exhaled slowly. I don't want to take this too far, but I can't let him keep stepping on my life. "Nor should you," she said. "We can request a temporary restraining order 500 feet for risk of violence or threats. Your grounds are strong, especially with video and the manager's statement. I recommend you file today." I nodded. "I'll do it now." As Nora walked me out, she added, "If Brent shows up or contacts you in any way, calls, texts, knocking, notify us directly. Don't handle it yourself." "Thank you, Lieutenant. I've learned that lesson." I left the station feeling lighter with every step down the stairs. I drove to a small cafe near the post office, took out my notebook, and drafted the restraining order request. Line by line, my hand trembled with age but stayed firm. Brent Klein, 30 years old, residing at 145 Cedar Drive, has engaged in threats, invasion of personal space, and breach of agreed-upon respect terms. History of gambling addiction and financial fraud attempts. Requesting a 500-foot temporary restraining order until formal hearing. I signed it, then used the post office scanner to send a digital copy to the sheriff's office. When "Submission Received" flashed on the screen, I leaned back and closed my eyes. Some things don't need shouting or payback. They need a signature placed right at the right time. At noon, I called the 3 creditors Alvin mentioned, the ones listed on Brent's gambling debt sheet. One from Frontier Financial, one from Continental Recovery, and one from the Silver Ridge Casino Credit Office. Each call was brief and proper. I said only, "Brent Klein no longer resides at 145 Cedar Drive. He has no rights or ties to this property. If you need contact, find his current address. Any document with my signature is no longer valid for him." One of them, with a gravelly voice, asked, "You're his father-in-law. I heard he co-owns the house with you." I answered, "Never. He lived on my kindness, and that kindness has expired." The man chuckled. "Got it, sir. Thanks for the heads up." I hung up and checked the time, just 2:30. I still had time to file the incident report about the threat at Pioneer Lodge. When I returned to the motel, Mr. Matthews, the graying manager, was at the desk. He waved me over. "I've pulled the video for you, Sam. Time-stamped and clear." He stood outside your door for exactly 5 minutes, muttering, then left. I opened the clip on my laptop, Brent, swaying, right at my door, mumbling, "The old man will learn to be afraid." That was enough. I asked Mr. Matthews to sign the incident statement, then took both the video and the affidavit to the sheriff's office. Lieutenant Nora met me at the door. She skimmed the report and nodded. "Enough for emergency handling. I'll rush it to the court this afternoon. Typically, it's 3 to 5 days, but given the risk, you'll have a temporary order within 24 hours. Thank you." "You're welcome. We work from evidence, and you've prepared yours well. Few people are this thorough." I smiled, tired but sincere. 30 years in banking taught me this: every story has paperwork, if you're clear-headed enough to keep it. I left the station as the light softened. The lake turned metallic silver under the evening sun. I stopped at a gas station, bought a black coffee, and sat in the car. In front of me lay a stack of papers, enough evidence, enough procedure, enough law. But what I felt wasn't triumph. It was the emptiness of a man who once loved, now writing his son-in-law's name under "alleged offender." I don't hate Brent, at least not anymore. What I see more clearly is Lydia's blindness, my daughter, who chose his side without understanding that every dollar I covered, every time I kept quiet, only pushed them further from their own character. That night, I sat at the small desk in my room. The yellow lamp pooled light over my timeline notebook, now twice as thick. I fitted the pieces together: the living room ultimatum, the forged application, the gambling debt, the threat video, the eviction filing, the restraining order request. When the last line clicked into place on the timeline, I leaned back and closed my eyes. The story was no longer scattered wounds. It was a complete picture of betrayal and awakening. I reached for the small framed photo on the shelf. Ruth was smiling, coffee in hand, hair blown to one side. I touched the frame and whispered, "I'm doing the right thing, Ruth. I finally learned to stand up for myself." The dim light glinted off the glass, and for a heartbeat I thought I saw Ruth nod. Outside, wind rose from the lake, leaves, whispering like a confirmation that things had finally aligned. I knew they'd retaliate, but I didn't expect it so fast. Just days after the restraining order was approved, Brent started a new campaign, not with paperwork but with words. Rumors spread across Riverton like wind over Flathead Lake. I heard whispers at the cafe, the post office, even the little grocery on the corner. Word is Mr. Whitaker's losing his mind. Someone talked him into selling the house. Poor Lydia, pregnant, and her father just walked out. I didn't need to guess where it came from. Brent, a man who's never lost a poker hand in his own imagination, was now betting his last chips on my reputation. That afternoon, Lydia called. "Dad, I need to talk." I kept my tone even. "Go ahead." A beat of silence, then a line that pinched my heart. "I'm pregnant." I didn't react, just asked. "Doctor's name? Appointment date?" "I'll cover all medical costs if there's a real risk." She hedged, voice shaking. "You don't need to call, it's private. It's a doctor I know, not convenient to say." I understood immediately. Another emotional card tossed on the table. I kept my voice light and clear. "Just have the doctor call me directly. If you truly need help, I'll help the right way, transparently. But I'm not paying for vague stories anymore." Silence on the line. Then a dry click. Lydia hung up. I sat still, looking at a cup of cold coffee. I wasn't angry, just coldly sad. Ruth used to say, "When someone has to lie to hold on, it means they're scared of losing something that never belonged to them." 2 days later, Brent showed up on the steps of First Mountain Bank, where I worked for 3 decades. He stood on the stairs, voice sharp, pointing at me. "Look, everyone, he's senile, abandoning his pregnant daughter, all because someone talked him into cutting off his family." People stopped. A few old clients, a few strangers, curious, doubtful eyes. I walked forward, unhurried. "Brent," I said loud enough for all to hear, "if you're going to perform, at least memorize your lines." He froze. I took a step closer, voice still, even. "I'm not senile. I've simply stopped paying for a man who owes $18,000 at Silver Ridge Casino, forged my signature to try for a $50,000 mortgage, and just got a restraining order for making threats." A ripple ran through the crowd. People glanced at each other, whispering. A woman murmured, "Good Lord, is that true?" Brent stammered, tried to swing back. "He's making it up. I held up my hand, cutting him off. "Want me to read the case number out loud? Or say the name of Lieutenant Nora Kemp, who received the evidence?" My voice wasn't loud, but it carried. In the eyes of the crowd, the loudest man was shrinking. Brent cursed and stormed off. What he didn't know, a bystander had recorded every word. Hours later, the clip hit the Riverton community group, "When the liar meets a father who keeps receipts." By the next morning, public opinion had flipped. That morning, Lieutenant Nora Kemp called me. "Mr. Whitaker, update for you. Brent Klein just asked a lawyer about adverse possession." I raised an eyebrow. "He's trying to use the law to take the house." "Yes, but he has no shot. Montana requires 5 years of continuous, hostile possession, and you invited them to stay. No legal basis." "We'll note his intent in the file." I actually laughed for the first time in weeks. Thanks, Nora. I guess he's grasping at the last straws. Let him thrash. The law isn't for crooks. That afternoon, the sheriff's office called. Mr. Whitaker, we just served the restraining order on Brent Klein. He got angry, yelled in the yard, neighbors recorded it. We filed an incident report. I opened my phone, sure enough. The video was spreading faster than the earlier gossip. In it, Brent stood in my yard, waving papers, shouting, "I'll take back what's mine. He owes me that house." Officers arrived moments later, read the order clearly, and forced him to leave. The whole block saw it. No one defended him. That night, I posted one short line on my page, no rant, no story. I supported my daughter and son-in-law for 5 years. Now I'm simply ending it. I'm still a father, but I'm not a bank. I didn't need to say more. Those who understand will understand. The rest, they'll watch the truth speak over time. 3 days later, Lieutenant Nora texted, Brent was called in by his superiors. Complaints from clients and the community about disruptive behavior and false claims. He may be suspended. I read the message and set the phone down. No joy, no gloating, just lightness. A kind of justice that doesn't need a courtroom. That evening, I walked down Cedar Drive, the street where my house used to be a home. Early May air was cool, with apple blossoms in the breeze. As I neared, I saw officers had temporarily taped off the front lawn to prevent more disturbances. The front door, the one Brent swore he would take back, was shut tight, locked. I watched from a distance, no anger left, only regret. The house was still there, white walls, the porch with Ruth's favorite rocker, but everything inside was no longer home. I turned away, leaving the wind hissing through the pines behind me. Each step felt lighter, surer. Only one thought echoed in my head. The door he tried to use to take what wasn't his has swung shut in his face. And for the first time in years, I knew I'd escaped someone else's rigged game to be the only player in my own life. Monday morning, while I was making coffee in the motel room, I got a call from an unknown number. A young woman's voice, shaky. "Mr. Whitaker? I'm calling from Frontier Financial's collections office. We need to verify a contact address for Mr. Brent Klein. He stated that the house at 145 Cedar Drive is jointly owned with you, but our records don't match." I looked out the window, steam lifting from my coffee in the early light. I spoke slowly, clearly. "That house is in my name only. Brent Klein has no ownership, is not a co-mortgagor, and is not permitted to use that address for financial transactions. If you need verification, please contact the Riverton County Court. They're handling the matter." She thanked me and hung up. I knew that call was only the first shot in the chain of consequences Brent was about to face. By midweek, I didn't have to guess anymore. Lydia called, panic in her voice. "Dad, what's happening?" "They garnished my wages. They said it's some kind of recovery order. Brent told me to call you." I sighed and kept my tone steady. "Lydia, that's the legal consequence of the loans your husband signed. They're garnishing to recover the debt. My assets aren't involved. But why would they do that? Can you help us ask for a delay?" "No, they're just following procedure, the same way I am. Every action has consequences." On the other end, Lydia went quiet for a long time. I heard her breathing hard, then choking up. I didn't know what he was hiding from me. He said he was working overtime to pay things off. Turns out it was the casino. I closed my eyes. Every word she said felt like stones dropping into the lake of memory. I only said softly, "Lydia, you need to learn to see the person as he is, not the person you hope for. Hope doesn't pay debt, and love doesn't save anyone who won't save himself," she cried. Not loudly, just small, broken sobs. I didn't console, I just listened. Because sometimes people can only learn their own lesson through tears. That afternoon, the police served the eviction notice. The 30-day clock started then. I didn't need to be there, but Lieutenant Nora Kemp texted an update. Papers were properly served. Both received copies and signed acknowledgement. All steps are moving on schedule. In the attached report, I saw the note. Recipients showed anger, uncooperative. No conflict occurred. I closed my phone and took a deep breath. The feeling wasn't exactly relief, more a bitter stillness, like watching the house you built with love separate itself from those no longer worthy of it. The next day, Brent lost his job. An old co-worker of his messaged me. Management said his outburst in front of the bank hurt the company's reputation. They had to terminate him. I didn't feel happy. I only felt the decay of a man burning himself down. That evening, Lydia called again, her voice hoarse. "Dad, he says he's leaving town. I don't know what to do. I'm scared." I went quiet a moment, then said, "Sometimes leaving is the only way someone faces himself. If he needs to go, let him go." The line went silent. I heard wind over the phone, as if Lydia stood on the porch staring into the dark, with nothing to hold on to. I added only, "You can come here, if you want. No one's forcing you to stay in a place that's falling apart." That night, Mrs. Palmer, the neighbor across from my house, texted, "Sam, there was a scuffle at your place last night. I saw Brent throwing things, Lydia screaming. I recorded a few clips as evidence in case the police need them." I read the message with a tightening chest. I thanked her, then saved all the clips to the evidence folder. On the screen, the porch light spilled through the window while a staggering figure hurled something to the floor, then stormed out. Lydia's voice followed, faint and desperate. The next morning, I drove to the end of the street and stopped across from 145 Cedar Drive. I didn't go in. I stood across the road and looked through the window. The curtain was crooked, newspaper pages scattered on the floor. The house looked intact, but it had no warmth left. I suddenly understood that the place was no one's fortress anymore. It was only the shell of a marriage built on money, now collapsing brick by brick. I went back to Pioneer Lodge and opened my laptop. In my inbox, there was an unread email from Attorney McIntyre. "Sam, if you're ready, we should review the will. I recommend reconsidering your beneficiaries, especially under the current circumstances." I stared at the screen for a long time. Each word looked like a question about the future. Ruth used to say, "A house isn't just where you live, it's how you choose who gets to walk into your memories." I called McIntyre back. "Do it," I said. "I want to amend the will. I don't want the property reverting to Lydia until she's ready to understand its real value." "Whom do you want to designate?" "I'm not sure yet. Maybe the Ruth Whitaker Foundation to support seniors, exploited by their own children. Ruth dreamed of that. Now I'll finish it for her." That afternoon, McIntyre sent a draft of the new will. I printed it and set it beside Ruth's photo. Sunset light poured through the window, warming her gentle smile and kind eyes in the picture. I laid my hand on the paper and said quietly, "I'm doing this for you, Ruth. So this house you called a fortress will protect those who deserve it, not store more mistakes." Outside, the wind picked up, pine needles drifting across the porch. I sat still, feeling empty but steady. In that quiet, I realized, sometimes the real fortress isn't in walls or doors, it's in the courage of someone who dares to say, "Enough." Thursday morning, the Riverton sky was softly gray, a light breeze moving through the riverside trees. I called Lydia calm, without blame or pleading. "I want to meet you, just the two of us. Riverside Diner, 10 a.m. She paused, then answered, small and trembling, "I'll come." I chose a window table, the same spot where, years ago, Ruth liked to watch people pass. A black coffee sent up a thin steam. Each time the door opened, the bell chimed and a cool, early spring draft followed. I checked my watch. 9:59. 1 minute later, Lydia walked in. She looked thinner than the last time I saw her, dark circles under her eyes, hair tied in a rush, her posture closed as if she feared the world seeing her. She sat across from me, avoiding my eyes. "Dad, I don't know where to start." "That's all right," I said. "I'll start." I opened my leather case and took out a neatly folded sheet, not a contract, not an indictment, but a single condition of truth. "Lydia," I said slowly, "this is the only condition for me to consider our relationship again." She looked up, eyes wet. "A condition?" "Yes. I don't need you to pay money. I don't need an apology, and I don't need you to cut anyone off. I only need you to speak the truth." She frowned. "What truth, Dad?" I looked straight into my daughter's eyes, the same eyes that once reflected all my and Ruth's youth. That for the past 5 years, I supported you tuition, the wedding, the house down payment, monthly mortgage, utilities, even the car insurance and groceries. And that you and Brent once gave me the ultimatum: serve my husband or get out of the house. The air around the table seemed to thicken. The soft clink of a spoon at the milk steamer carried oddly clear. Lydia clenched her hands, lips trembling. "Who do you want me to tell that to?" "Everyone you let believe the opposite." I paused, then spelled it out. "First, a short statement at Grace Community Church, where half the town shows up on Sunday mornings. Second, a letter to the Riverton Chronicle for their Letters from Residents section. And last, a Facebook post on your page, where you once wrote that my dad abandoned his pregnant daughter. You only need to write the truth, nothing more." She stared. "You want me to make it public?" "From the beginning, I've never asked you to pick a side. I only want you to pick the truth." She dropped her gaze, twisting her fingers. "I don't know what people will think. I feel ashamed." I set my cup down, my voice gentle but firm. "Lydia, the truth never shames anyone. It only strips away what we should be ashamed of." A tear fell onto the back of her hand. I watched, but didn't reach out. Not from coldness, but because I knew if I touched her, she'd lean on me again and assume every mistake could be forgiven without being repaired. I went on, "Even one more thing you should know. I've changed the will." She flinched, looking up. "What did you say?" "The house at 145 Cedar Drive will not revert to you. After I pass, it will be transferred to Frontier Veterans Housing, the organization helping homeless veterans. Ruth wanted to help them, and now I am doing it for her." Lydia burst into tears. "You've taken everything from me." I shook my head, my eyes still soft. "No, Lydia. I only took back what you're not ready to receive. I don't need you to be poor. I need you to be honest. I want to know our relationship isn't held together by inheritance, but by respect." She stayed silent. Her lips moved as if to speak, then stopped. Outside, the clouds began to break and weak sunlight slid across the glass. I saw her face clearly, a mix of regret and fear. "Dad," Lydia whispered, "I don't know if I'm brave enough to say it all. I'm afraid people will look down on me." I smiled, slowly. "Courage isn't the absence of fear. It's doing what's right while your heart shakes. You don't speak so people pity you, you speak to reclaim your own clean ground." She bowed her head and wiped her eyes. "And if I can't do it?" I sighed and met her wet gaze. "Then I'll understand you're still choosing Brent, choosing a life built on lies. And in that case, we'll live separate lives. I won't hate you, but I won't go back." A long quiet passed. Only the wall clock ticked. I said the last line, not raised, not commanding, just a father who'd reached the end of his lenience. "You have until this Sunday, 10 a.m., at Grace Community Church. If you show up and tell the truth, I'll be in the front row. If not, I'll stand and walk out, for good." Lydia bit her lip, tears spotting the tablecloth. I knew I'd cut the last string binding us, but it was the necessary cut for healing. I took out my wallet and set down 2 checks. On mine, I wrote one line in blue ink. You pay for your coffee. I'll pay for mine from today. Everything is clear. I folded it, slid it toward her, and stood up. I have to go. Riverside has a 2-hour parking limit. It sounded simple, but I knew Lydia understood. I was talking about the time left for us. I stepped out into the sun. As the door closed, the bell rang again. In that moment, I didn't look back. Through the glass, I saw Lydia sitting still, staring at the hot coffee. Steam curled upward, blurring her face. Her hand trembled, as if trying to hold something slipping away the last trust between father and daughter. And there, on that old street, I heard Ruth's familiar sigh inside me. Truth is never easy to swallow, but it's the only thing that makes people stand tall. Sunday, 10 a. The bells of Grace Community Church rang under Riverton's clear blue sky. I sat in the third row from the back, next to a few old neighbors, the same faces that had whispered about me for months. Today, they looked at me differently, not with pity, but with expectation. Up front, Pastor Delgado, salt and pepper hair, tall frame, deep voice, spoke about responsibility and honesty. He read the familiar verse, "The truth will set you free." I bowed my head, fingers holding the pew edge, my hand shaking for a moment. Not from fear, but from knowing I was about to witness what I'd long waited for, not a victory, but an awakening. The pastor paused and scanned the room. Before we close, I want to invite someone to share a story of accountability and courage. Whispers rose, then Lydia stepped forward. She wore a light gray dress, no makeup, hair tied back. In the glow from the stained glass, her face looked both tired and lit by something very real. I heard the breath of those around me as she walked to the wooden lectern, where the pastor waited. She unfolded a trembling page, voice small but clear. "My name is Lydia Klein. I'm the daughter of Mr. Samuel Whitaker." A hush spread. I raised my head and looked straight at the pulpit. "For the past 5 years," she continued, "my father has supported my family for my college tuition, the wedding, the house down payment, the monthly mortgage, utilities, and even car insurance. In total, more than $187,000. Pen scratched quietly in the press row. Lydia paused to breathe. "In return, my husband and I treated him with ingratitude." Her voice shook but didn't break. "One afternoon, I told my father, 'Serve my husband or get out of the house.' He stayed silent, didn't fight back. That night, he left with only my mother's old suitcase. I thought he was weak. Now I understand. That was the only way he could keep his dignity." No one spoke. Only the wind through the stained glass and warm light across the pews. I glanced around, someone wiped away tears. An elderly woman ahead nodded. Lydia went on, steadier. "I stayed silent because I was ashamed. But my father was right. The truth never shames us. It only strips away what we should be ashamed of. Today, I speak not to beg for forgiveness, but to redeem the truth. If anyone asks what I learned from my father, I would say that kindness can't live alongside lies." She folded the paper and bowed. A stillness held for a few seconds. Then the room applauded. Not loudly, not for drama. It was applause for courage. I didn't stand or rush to hug her. I only nodded, like a witness to the act I'd been waiting for. Because I knew trust doesn't grow in an embrace. It grows when someone steps out of the dark on their own. Lydia looked toward me, eyes swollen but bright. I nodded back wordless, but enough for her to know, "I heard you, and I believe you." When the service ended, many came to offer kind words, saying I must be proud to have a daughter like her. I only smiled lightly. They didn't know that courage had been bought with many tears. Outside, a spring breeze carried the smell of fresh-cut grass. Lydia paused on the steps, looked at me, about to speak, then stopped. I said only, "You just did the hardest thing you'll ever do." She answered softly, "Dad, I feel like a mountain's been lifted. I looked into her eyes. Good. Only when you're light enough can you start over. Brent didn't show that day. Lieutenant Nora reported he'd left town the night before with a few duffel bags. But that morning, I got a threatening text sent to my old number. Scattered lines, bitter words. I forwarded it to Nora. She called back within 10 minutes, firm. Don't worry, we'll handle it. If he's still in state, there will be a notice for monitoring. That afternoon, Lydia's letter ran in the Riverton Chronicle's Letters from Residents. No sensational headline, no spin. Just a short, honest confession. Sometimes we hurt the only person who loved us unconditionally because we assume they'll never leave. I was wrong. It was shared hundreds of times. In the comments, no one scolded, only empathy and small stories from people who'd been in similar places. That evening, Lydia posted on Facebook with public comments on, "I once thought I was abandoned until I understood I was the one who left. Today, I choose the truth." I didn't comment. I just took screenshots and saved them with the article link and the church recording. On my drive, I named the folder, Lydia, Redemption. When I finished, I sat quietly before the laptop. The sun was setting outside the Pioneer Lodge window, painting the sky with orange and purple. I opened my worn leather journal to a new page and wrote, May 14th, Lydia chose the truth. No winners, no losers. Only a father who waited long enough to see his daughter step into the light. I set the pen down and leaned back. It felt like dropping an invisible backpack I'd carried for years. Outside, Riverton's sky was startlingly clear after the storm. Sunlight flashed across the lake like 1,000 tiny mirrors. Kids laughed in the park. I looked at Ruth's framed photo on the desk and smiled. I kept my promise, Ruth. Not with a victory, but with the truth. A light breeze moved the curtain, bringing the scent of coffee and warm wood. I closed my eyes and felt my heartbeat slow, steady. Maybe, for the first time in years, I was truly at peace. 3 months later, with summer laying a soft golden sheen over Riverton, the house at 145 Cedar Drive, once a battlefield of hurt and silence, wore a completely different face. The white fence was freshly painted. New windows reflected the morning light. The scent of paint and new lumber mingled with lavender by the porch. A wooden sign out front read, Frontier Veterans Housing, with a line below, This home is for those who kept their oath. I stood there holding a bouquet of wildflowers. My feelings mixed a thin sadness like dew on leaves and a serenity I hadn't felt in years. Beside me, Sergeant Teresa Owens, brown hair, sturdy build, in a simple shirt, smiled as she signed for the keys. A recently discharged veteran after 12 years of service, she's a single mom to a 7-year-old boy named Caleb. This unit isn't big, I said, placing the keys in her hand, but it's safe, has a backyard, and the windows catch the sun. I think you two will like it. Teresa squeezed my hand, voice tight. Thank you, Mr. Whitaker. You don't know what this means to us. Caleb slept in the car for 2 weeks before we got into the program. I watched the boy running on the grass, straw blonde hair flying, laughter ringing across the yard. In that moment, every tiredness in me dissolved. Farther off, the Frontier Veterans Housing team and a few local businesses took photos. They'd pitched in. A building supply shop provided paint, shingles, and plumbing at near cost. Mr. Reynolds's woodshop donated 3 new kitchen sets. The Riverton Community Fund paid for a small backyard play area, swings, a slide, a few planters. A local reporter asked me during the handoff, "Do you feel a loss now that your house belongs to someone else?" I smiled, looking toward the boy on the swing, and said, "No, I haven't lost anything. I've only moved it to a place more worthy. Some houses are built to live in, but some are built to heal." After the ceremony, I stayed when everyone left. I stood alone on the porch, Touched the new wood sign. The rough grain under my fingers made me remember the first time Ruth and I painted this place. She laughed and said, "A house is only truly beautiful when it makes other people feel welcome." Now, I think Ruth would smile. I bowed my head and left Cedar Drive, no heaviness, no turning back. I moved to a small cabin by Flathead Lake, about a 10-minute drive from town. The cabin is just over 600 square feet, with a sloped wood roof, a little porch with 2 rockers and a pine coffee table. In the mornings I make coffee and open the window to watch the mist lift off the lake. In the afternoons I fish, or sometimes just sit and listen to the wind. At night, I read mostly books Ruth left behind, Steinbeck, Hemingway, and a few worn volumes of Robert Frost. I'm no longer haunted by sudden knocks or needy texts. My personal finances are clean now, with no leak accounts. I organized all the paperwork, closed the auxiliary accounts, and routed my pension to a new bank. Every time I look at the balance sheet, I feel lighter, not because of money, but because it's tidy. One afternoon, the new neighbors, the Hendersons, knocked and invited me to a weekend barbecue. The husband, Mark, in his 50s, carried a tray of meat and smiled. "We heard you used to be a credit advisor, right? Then come help us budget the barbecue." I laughed, the gentle laugh I thought I'd forgotten. From then on, I settled into my own rhythm. Morning walks along the lake, jazz in the late afternoon, evenings with neighbors talking about salmon season. No one calls me a grumpy old man or senile anymore. I'm just Sam Whitaker, a 68-year-old man who likes black coffee, lives quietly, and is learning to believe in small new beginnings. Late one night, my phone buzzed. A text from Lydia. "Dad, I've started therapy. The doctor says I need to rebuild trust, not with words but with actions. I want to see you once a week. We'll only talk about what's real, no inheritance and no past. Is that okay, Dad?" I read that text over and over. Outside, a light breeze moved across the lake, and the moonlight shimmered like hundreds of tiny mirrors. I thought about what we'd lost and what was slowly coming back. I texted back, "Okay, every Wednesday, at Riverside Diner. 1 hour, no victim roles, no blame, just a father and a daughter." 3 days later we met. The conversation wasn't dramatic, no tears, just 2 people sitting across from each other, talking about coffee, the weather, and a few good books. Lydia said she was studying part-time to be a bookkeeper and wanted to pay off the rest of her debt herself. I didn't praise her. I just nodded because real change doesn't need applause, only persistence. After that, she started showing up on time, smiled more, and talked less about regret. I kept a healthy distance, no pressure, no lectures. That relationship was being rebuilt one small action at a time, just like she promised. One late afternoon at the end of September, I sat at my desk and opened the leather notebook that's been with me through all of this. I pulled out a clean sheet of paper and hand-wrote my last letter to Ruth. "Ruth, you always said what matters isn't keeping the house, but keeping our dignity. Today, I believe I've done that. The house now belongs to people who truly need a place to start over, and I've found my own peace here by the lake. Lydia is learning to live more honestly, day by day. She's fragile, not broken. She's coming back, one small step at a time. I still make a coffee every morning the way you did, and I keep your photo on the desk. Every time I see your smile, I remember there are battles that don't need to be won with applause, they just need to end in peace. We kept our dignity, Ruth." I folded the letter and set it beside the frame. Sunset poured a warm orange glow over Ruth's face in the photo. Outside, the soft slap of little waves against the shore kept time like a heartbeat. I smiled and whispered, "I'm home now, Ruth." Not the house on Cedar Drive, the home inside myself. In that quiet sunset, I felt it clearly. Some houses truly belong only to those who know how to value them. That fall in Riverton came earlier than usual. The air was crisp, maples turned gold along the roads around the lake. I still lived in the small cabin by the water, but every Monday morning I drove into town not for work anymore, but to start something else, learning how to be a father again. Lydia now worked part-time at the town library. When I stopped by, I saw a small name tag that read Assistant Librarian on her shirt as she shelved books for older patrons, checking out novels or picture books. Once, she caught my eye from the reading room corner, looked a little shy, then smiled. That smile wasn't forced, simple and calm, like a clean breeze. I heard she'd signed up for a personal finance class run by the community council, the same class I quietly emailed her the registration link for 2 months earlier. When I asked, Lydia just smiled. I think I should start understanding money instead of letting it define me. I nodded. That's a late lesson I paid for, too. One evening, she sent me a photo of the receipt for her first credit card payment, a small amount, under $1,000, but the first one she paid with her own hands. I didn't reply with praise or emojis. I just texted, I see it. You're heading the right way. Not because I wasn't proud, but because no, real pride is when she doesn't need me to confirm it anymore. Lydia and I slowly found a new way to talk. No more guilt-soaked arguments, just short, honest, practical exchanges. I remember her telling me a group therapy tip. Use I statements. Speak from your own view instead of blaming. She tried it with me. Dad, I feel hurt when you stay silent too long, because I think you don't care anymore. I answered after a pause, I feel silence is the only way for you to hear yourself. Because before that, everything I said got blocked. For the first time, we didn't argue. We listened and responded like two people learning to walk together again after a long time lost. Another time, Lydia looked at me and spoke softly. I'm sorry not for everything that happened, but because I once believed you could endure forever. No one should be asked to do that. I simply said, I accept your apology because it came at the right time when we're both ready to understand. Even so, I kept clear boundaries. When Lydia texted, Dad, I'm in a small financial bind, could you help a little for now? I exhaled and called her. No, Lydia, but I'll connect you with a free legal aid counselor at the community center. They can help with the divorce paperwork and reorganizing your finances. That's a better way. There was a brief silence, then she said quietly, I understand. Thank you for not rescuing me anymore. That sentence eased me more than any thank you, because only when someone steps out of the victim role do they really grow up. On a light rainy afternoon, I opened my estate notebook again. The paper had yellowed, the ink had faded a little, but every line was still clear. I reread the section I'd signed with Attorney McIntyre. The house on Cedar Drive goes to Frontier Veterans Housing, with a private note, for those who understand the value of gratitude and service. I turned to the last page and added by hand, if Lydia reads this after I'm gone, I want you to know, nothing I leave is meant to punish you, but to teach you that sometimes giving is the only way to keep what matters most, your self-respect. I closed the notebook and locked it in the drawer. No bitterness, just clarity. On a Thursday morning, Lieutenant Nora Kemp called me. Mr. Whitaker, an update. Brent Klein has been sued in civil court in 2 states for credit card debt and financial fraud. We've heard he may have left Montana, but we don't know where he is now. I thought for a second. Is there any risk he'll come back? Very low. But we're keeping the file open. If you get any contact, call the police right away. I understand. Thank you, Nora. When I hung up, I looked out at the lake, a misty drizzle softening the water's surface. I decided to close the case file in my cabinet, leaving only a yellow warning slip on top. Contact police immediately if there's any sign of Brent Klein. I don't want to say his name anymore. That chapter is closed. Meanwhile, Lydia started a string of small, real actions. She told me she was writing apology letters to neighbors on Cedar Drive, the ones who had seen our arguments and watched me leave with an old suitcase. I don't know if they even remember. she said, "but I need to say it so I can be at peace." I smiled. People may forget words, but they don't forget actions. Real remorse reaches them. She sent me a copy of the first letter. "I'm Lydia, Mr. Whitaker's daughter. Years ago, I treated my father poorly, and you may have seen it. I'm not asking for forgiveness, I just want you to know I'm learning to be a better person. Thank you for witnessing without judging." I read it with a tight throat. Simple words, nothing fancy, but very real. I know Ruth would be proud if she were here. On a weekend afternoon, I met Lydia at the park by Flathead Lake. A soft autumn wind, the water brushed with sunset. We sat on an old wooden bench and watched a line of ducks glide by. I told her about Ruth, not the illness or the sad days, but the small things. How she made coffee, the little humming while she watered plants, the habit of folding a page corner to mark a favorite line. "I remember Mom used to say," Lydia smiled, "that you only grow up when you know how to apologize at the right time." I nodded, eyes on the distance. "Right. And your mom also said, if there's one thing she most wanted to see, it's you living honestly with others and with yourself." She went quiet. The wind moved through her hair, and the late light warmed her face. I looked at my daughter, and, in that moment, I saw Ruth in her eyes again, gentle, willing to listen, no longer defensive. We sat there a long time without saying more. The sky faded to pale orange, and the clouds drifted across the lake like the last tangled threads of a cloth, finally being undone. And I understood. Every thread, even if it once broke, can be joined again with enough patience, truth, and love. 3 months after that afternoon by the lake, I found 3 handwritten letters in the mailbox outside my cabin, all from people living in my old house now called Frontier Veterans Housing. The first was from Sergeant Teresa Owens, in neat handwriting. "Caleb has his own room for the first time in his life. Every night he looks out the window and says, 'I think the person who made this house must be a really good person. Right, Mom? Thank you for turning a place to live into a home.'" The second was from a single dad, an Iraq veteran, saying he'd found a job and could send his daughter to school without assistance. The third was from a young woman, just one line. "Thank you for giving people who lost everything a chance to start again." I read each letter over a cup of cold coffee, listening to the wind move through the cabin eaves. Maybe no court, ruling, and no apology could bring the same sense of fairness and wholeness as those words did. The next week, I wrote a short piece for the Riverton Chronicle titled "Knowing the Difference Between Kindness and Enabling." I wrote that kindness isn't wrong, but without boundaries it turns into enabling. I told my own story, no names, no address, just a story about an old father who realized that sometimes, to keep love, you have to dare to say no. It ran in the opinion section on Friday morning. Over 100 comments appeared, most from parents my age. I was used by my kids too, and now I finally set limits. I read every line, feeling both sad and comforted because it turns out we're not alone. A week later, Lydia texted me, "Dad, I've been invited to speak to a support group for young people stuck in money problems. They want me to share about the ultimatum lesson. Are you okay with that?" I replied, "Go ahead. The truth belongs to those who keep it." That evening, she stood in the library hall in front of almost 30 young people. I sat in the back row, quietly watching. Lydia talked about years of dependency, turning someone else's kindness into her entitlement, and the moment she gave her father an ultimatum and lost everything. "My dad didn't punish me," she said. "He taught me that sometimes silence is the most honest form of love." The room was silent. I went back to that afternoon years ago when I set down my suitcase and walked out. But this time, in my daughter's voice, there was no anger, only growth. After that, Lydia and I set a 3-3-3 rule our way to keep truth and discipline together. 3 months of proof, no promises, only actions. 3 hard conversations, each one about something we used to avoid, money, trust, and responsibility. 3 specific acts of amends, not with money, but with time, honesty, and real effort. We wrote it down and stuck it on my fridge, in hers. It wasn't a pledge, it was a guide for trust that was coming back to life. One afternoon, I texted Lieutenant Nora Kemp, "Thank you for standing with the law and still understanding people." She replied simply, "Thank you for not letting justice be just a word in a file." I smiled. In my heart, I knew sometimes the law protects us, but compassion saves the human part in us. That night, I sat outside the cabin, listening to the lake lap softly against the rocks. The moon drifted over the water, glittering like 1,000 tiny mirrors. I thought of Ruth. When she was alive, she used to say, "Peace isn't hiding from the storm, it's knowing where you belong in the middle of it." Now I understood it more than ever. Peace isn't sitting still, it's living within your boundaries and not letting anyone else define your worth. A soft knock at the door. I stood up. Lydia was there, holding a familiar round box. "Apple pie," she said, a little shy. "Mom's recipe." I looked at her, not the dependent girl she once was, but a woman learning to earn back trust with actions. "Dad," she said slowly, "I'm not here to ask for anything today. I just want to share a dinner." I opened the door wider and smiled. "Come in, sweetheart." No promises about money, no dramatic tears, just a real chance for trust. We sat on the porch, the smell of apple pie filling the air, blended with the quiet sound of water against the shore. I felt like Ruth was with us, smiling through the small candle on the table. I took a sip of coffee, watched my daughter take the first bite, and felt one thing clearly. When you say enough, you don't break your family, you save what's still worth saving. As night fell, I wrote a few last lines in the notebook that's been with me through this whole journey. I lost a house, but I found myself. I lost empty promises, but gained the truth. And I've learned that dignity and justice aren't in a courtroom, they're in how we live every day. I closed the notebook and listened to the wind moving through the pines. At my age, I don't dream of long trips anymore. I just want to make coffee each morning, hear the water hit the shore, and know that I'm living right. Thank you for staying with me all the way to the end of this story. At this age, I've learned that sometimes saying enough isn't about closing a door, it's about keeping what's still good in us. What about you? Where in the world are you from? And have you ever had to say enough to protect your dignity? If this story reminded you of someone, a moment, or a time you stood up for yourself, share it in the comments. Maybe your words will help someone else find the courage to do the same. If this journey touched you, hit like, subscribe, and come back next week for my next story. Thank you for sitting with me, listening to an old man tell his story, and for reminding me there are still hearts out there that understand the value of kindness with boundaries.